My pleasure to have Ron Thomson back, former warden, Wankie National Park, and one of the most wildlife knowledgeable people I know. And Kevin Wood, who's actually a famous brewer, but also very committed conservationist. And I know how much Kevin loves wildlife and loves Africa, and that's just the point I want to make before we start this debate, which is on the pros and cons of hunting, basically. And I think that's what we've got to stick to. Trophy hunting, safari hunting, sport hunting, call it what you will, always a highly emotive subject. And I think that's why this whole argument gets a little bit blurred at the edges, because people are inclined to let emotions get the better of them. But that's another story. The fact is, I know both of you guys love Africa. You want the best for wildlife. Your intentions are both very honorable, and it's just that you've got a different view of how one best protects what's left of African wildlife. So without any more from me, really, I want to go straight in at the deep end with an issue that has arisen in the recent past, with the shooting of two big elephant bulls in Botswana, two big trophy bulls. I think the one ended up with one tusk over 100 pounds. So from a trophy hunting point of view, this was quite an event, but it certainly got a lot of international attention, mostly negative. And I know that Kevin has strong views on incidents such as this. So, Kevin, why don't you kick off by putting forward your reasons why you don't think those elephants should have been shot?
I think it's important for me to start. I'm not anti-hunting. I'm anti. I think there's very little that's sustainable that's left in the world. I think that's the first thing. And I think it's important that and science isn't always an exact. I think it's important that we use the latest data out there, and it's for everything. It's not just wildlife. You can go into any other industry, oil, arms, tobacco, you can carry on. It's endless. I think when it comes to counting of elephants in particular, and you can run through the numbers. So if you go into all your African countries that have elephant populations, whether it be big strongholds like Botswana, Tanzania, that used to have massive herds in Selous as an example, and even all the way to your jungle elephants in the Congo. The numbers just don't add up. So where they come with 480,000 elephant as an example, and they put a number on 220 in Botswana, that leaves 260 in the rest of Africa. I run through the numbers. You land up with a population of close to 700,000. So I don't know where these numbers come from. And I think to probably answer your question a little bit more directly, if we look at numbers, where are the quotas coming from? And that's a big question I have. The quotas, they can't be based on, if those are the numbers they're using, they're not accurate. And when you get to species that are really threatened, I know Ron's got an example. Ron doesn't believe elephants are endangered, and with the number, whatever they are, it doesn't sound like they're endangered. But I mean, you go back 100 odd years, there were 21 million, as an example. And when you get to species like lion, where the argument is, or the numbers that are thrown around, that there's roughly 20,000 wild lions left, it becomes even more concerning.
Kev, can I just jump in there? I just want to try and keep this more focused at this stage. I know that those two big bulls going down is something that you feel should not have happened. Yeah. But it's not in the interests of conservation or whatever. If you were calling the shots, you would not have allowed that. And I want you to tell us why you feel so strongly about the fact that those two elephants were shot.
Well, if you look at the economics, photographic versus or safaris versus hunting, the numbers also don't add up. I mean, you're sitting on billions of rands worth of safaris or tourism versus hundreds of millions for hunting. So if you want to use pure economics, hunting actually undervalues these animals. I mean, those big tuskers, how many times they're going to get photographed in their lifetime, whether it be 60 or 70 years, whatever numbers you want to put on there. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. One hunt, what did those elephants get shot for? $70,000, $100,000? I don't know. I mean,
all right.
So economically, it makes no sense.
All right. So, Kev, what I'm going to take to Ron is basically you saying you dispute the numbers. You don't feel the numbers are believable, and you don't feel that the financial rewards from hunting are justifiable. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, Ron, you take it from there. Start with the numbers, I think.
Well, the numbers can be looked at on two levels. In many respects, I agree with Kevin that you can't rely on numbers. That is because the numbers are crooked all along the line, depending on who you are and what your objective is in quoting numbers. You can only manage animals not in terms of numbers, not in terms of species, but in populations of a species. You cannot, for example, say the elephant is an endangered species, and there's no such thing, because animals don't get managed at that level. They get managed population by population. And the reason for that is that each population, well, let me define a population. A population is defined as a group of animals of the same species that can or do interact on a daily basis and which breed only with others in the same group. So you will have like a place like Kruger National Park, for example, that is not linked to any other population. You cannot say that because the Kruger elephants and the Botswana elephants equal a number about 300,000, say, that doesn't wash in terms of management, because each population has got particular requirements, which is dictated by its habitat. And the habitat and the numbers of animals are the things that determine whether the population is safe, whether it is unsafe, or whether it is excessive. That takes us back to carrying capacity of habitats. Habitats have got certain carrying capacities for different species. And habitats, in fact, are more important than species, because species are adapted to particular habitat types. And if that habitat type is not in a game reserve, you can put 1 million animals of that species into that game reserve and they won't take. They have to be introduced to habitats to which they are adapted and to which they are suitable. So when you're managing something, if you have got 400,000 or 500,000 IUCNs think it's roughly about 500,000 elephants in Africa, you can't manage them like that. The IUCN regrettably think you can, CITES think you can, but I'm telling you now you can't. You can only manage Kruger National Park, the elephants in Kruger National Park, according to the impact that they are having on their own habitat. Doesn't matter where other elephants there are anywhere around. It can only be managed bit by bit like that. So to talk of numbers, these hundreds of numbers, I don't believe them. I believe that the Great Elephant Census, for example, the books were cooked so thoroughly there that I don't listen to those kind of figures anymore. To me, they are just a guide. I have heard the figure 220,000 for the mega population in the Botswana area. Now, the difference between the Botswana mega population and Kruger, for example, is Kruger is a distinct individual population. The Botswana elephants are divided between 5 different countries. Each country has got a certain number. And they call that a mega population because how are these countries going to get together and decide how they're going to manage that mega population? 5 different countries with 5 different attitudes. And there is only one attitude, and that is that you have to maintain the species diversity, the principle of management in a national park, and the Kasa conservation area up in the Botswana area is interested in the fact of maintaining species diversity, but they are allowing the elephants up there to destroy their habitats. And every habitat that they destroy, one more species is chucked out of the cradle, and it becomes extinct. So, you know, there are different intensities of understanding of what happens here. And I personally believe that those two elephant bulls were the exact right elephants to be taken. I don't want to hold the floor here, but if you take any species, whether it's lions or elephants, but let's talk about elephants. If you can know what the expected life or the life expectancy of an elephant is, you can then divide up the population into 4 quarters. The first life quarter is up to from birth to 15 years, and those animals are with the cows. The second life quarter is from those are young bulls that leave the cow herds. Most people don't understand this. Elephants don't live a big happy life together with mommy and daddy and baby all together. That doesn't happen. It's a very, very vicious and aggressive species. So when they're kicked out of the mother's herd at 15, they then become in their second life quarter, and they are then like teenagers growing up in a human society. They're growing quickly, they're adjusting themselves around to everything. But more than anything else, a lot of them will probably start to come into must. The young bulls will start coming into must. As soon as that happens, your third life quarter bulls, which are your adult bulls, truly adult bulls, that is 30 to 45 years old, they don't like competition from the younger males when females come in estrus. So they go in and discipline the youngsters, and it's only the third life quarter bulls, which are the fully adults, fully mature, in their prime. Those are the animals that do the breeding. When you go into your fourth life quarter, that is from 46 to 60 years of age, then the animals are starting to go into a senile decline. The other thing about elephants is that they only have 6 sets of molars in their lifespan. And by the time they get to 60, they're onto their sixth molar. And when that crumbles and falls out of their mouths, they've got no teeth left to masticate their food. So they then die of starvation.
So what was the estimated age of these, what age would you estimate those 2 bulls were?
Well, I've seen photographs of the teeth. I've discussed it with people in Botswana who know how to interpret the molar systems. And it would appear that the second of those two elephants was between 53 and 54 years of age. So he was well into his fourth cycle, and he was on the slippery slope to extinction, as it were. And those are the animals that are surplus to the population. If you take them out of the equation and you leave your third quarter animals to do all the breeding, which is what they normally do, it is in fact those big bulls that are the ones that you can dispose of the easiest with the best conscience, because they don't want to go and fight with bulls in the third life quarter who are bigger and younger than they are and who have got better teeth, because the fourth life quarter bulls are sliding into senility, and they definitely don't want to fight for the right to go and mate with a cow. So in all things, whether it's lions or whether it's elephants, whatever, it's your fourth life quarter animals which are the ones that deserve the best to be taken out as trophy animals.
Okay, let me stop you there, Ron. Kev, are you on the same wavelength as Ron on that point, that they are past their breeding prime? Whether that's a good reason to shoot them or not is another question, but do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Well, look, what Ron's saying makes a hell of a lot of sense. I mean, I looked at your guys' video call the other day. I don't debate that. I think, you know, if you want to look at the bigger picture, you know, if you look at all the corridors that are getting opened up around Southern Africa, and whoever these people might be, whether you want to call them hunters, conservationists, it's not important. What's important is all the corridors that are getting opened up. I mean, you just look at the Kruger. They've now, a few years ago, probably just over 10 years ago, they opened up Kutada 16. It's now linked to Gonarezo. They're now linking it to the Elephant Park in Mozambique. And if you go back in, you know, like the last 100, 150 years ago, all the migratory routes have been messed up. And it's going to take, I don't know, generations for those migratory routes to start up again. I think for us to be discussing how many numbers can be held, I think it's like a bit of a nowhere.
All right, I think we've agreed that those elephant are getting on, and they're probably superfluous to requirements from a breeding point of view. Let's just leave that as it is. But let's go on to this question of financial return. If we're now looking at sustaining elephant populations or wildlife through looking at the economics, you say those two elephants are more valuable alive than dead.
Definitely.
Ron,
Definitely.
what is your response to that position?
Okay, look, I've been in this business for 62 years, so I've seen a lot going on in those years. And what I can tell you about these old bulls is that they're very sedentary. They don't move around a hell of a lot. They find a habitat which satisfies their needs, and they will go in there sometimes with two Ascaris. I have seen these big bulls with younger bulls with them. I don't know the full reason why these Ascaris go with the old bulls, but it is a well-known thing that you often find big bulls with Ascari younger bulls with them. I can't understand what they're doing there, but very often what most people don't understand is that your bulls and cows live totally separate lives, totally separate. And when the bulls come into must, they go looking for a cow herd where there's a cow in estrus, and then they mate with the cow, then they go back to the bulls, and they live on their own. But the bulls don't live as close-knitly as the cows do. You can find cow herds in close units, but the bulls, if you go and look wherever you get these big bull herds or any bull herds, just stand and watch them for a little while, and what you find is that they maintain an individual distance. It's very important to them that they have a high rank in the bull hierarchy, because the bulls with the highest rank are the ones that come into must the most, and the ones that get the most opportunity to go and mate with the cows. So rank is a predominantly important issue in bull society. And those baby bulls, before they've even got tiny little tushes, are fighting between their mother's legs. And it starts from there right through into the third life quarter. When they get into the old age stage and their teeth start wearing out, they have difficulty finding enough nutrition out of the environment to keep themselves going. They're very conscious of this, I think. I can't think like for an elephant, but there was a very, very big bull called Kambaku in the Gonarejo, in the Nyamasicana Basin. I was in charge of the Gonarejo for 5.5 years as a young game warden. And I saw this bull and photographed him when I first went to the Nyamasicana. And he was a very big bull, two beautifully matched tusks. And I never saw him for 5 years. He was there. Other people said that they thought they'd seen him. Then our head office said, we must find out where this big elephant is. And they put up aircraft and helicopters to go and look for him. And they found him in the Sibonja Hills in a nice little secluded area. He had his own little area where he wanted to go, and he wasn't bothered with anybody. And they found him. And that's the second time I saw him in 5 years. They darted him and they put a collar around him. Now that elephant stayed there for years and years and years without anybody seeing him. So to say that these big bulls are good material for tourism, yes, they are when they are seen, when tourists see these big bulls. But all the big bulls that were in Kruger, they were there all the time, but they weren't always seen. And they seemed to understand that it was a good idea to get away from where the human crowds are. So I question very much the fact that these big bulls, because they are never seen, we say this bull, if he lasts for 10, 20 years like this, he will bring so much tourist money in because the tourists like to come and see him, but the tourists don't see him because he hides away. So there are a lot of these funny little quirks to the whole elephant management issue, which don't make sense to me.
Ron, what I would like to just chuck in there for just general consideration, the fact is, from what I've learned about hunting in my days, most hunting areas, Kevin, are only hunting areas because they're not viable photographic areas. If you don't have the population densities in these areas to attract photographic tourists, that's why there's a place for hunting. If you could generate the same sort of return in these areas through photographic, then I think the argument for safari hunting falls away. But Ron, I think I don't know if you both agree with me, but that's my take on this whole question of the economic consideration. Hunting has a role in marginal areas where you're not in a position to advertise for photographic type clients. And I think where these elephant were shot is actually, I'm not 100% sure, but it's one of those marginal areas that a photographic operator is probably not going to be able to do too much, to operate much.
Look, you know what, if you look around the world, to try and answer your question, I mean, all these areas are diminishing at a rate second to none. So I don't think that might be true in the past. It's not true going into the future. And these areas are going to become more and more sought after because the world is becoming more and more pressurized. And we can't isolate hunting on its own. This has much bigger socioeconomic implications, in the world. We all look at life becomes more pressurized. We all look for places to go to get away from it all. And yes, one can. I don't agree with what you just said. I mean, I've traveled to just about every GMA area in southern and East Africa. Those areas are beautiful. The fact that you can't get there is because they're so remote. There's no infrastructure. That doesn't say they're not beautiful from a photographic point.
Look, we're not talking about the aesthetics. I'm talking about the actual commercial viability of these areas. And if you can't access them and they're too remote or for whatever reason, they're not viable from a photographic point of view. And that is where hunting has a role to play, because hunters will go into those areas. Ron, I don't know, do you agree with that position?
Well, there's so many twists and turns. Basically, the answer to your question is yes, I do. But then Kevin will say, well, in another 50 years, what people don't see as value will be valuable in those days because they'll be looking for escape areas. I can understand that. But there are a number of other things where people start attributing human qualities to these animals, and they get it all messed up. For example, there is no such thing as an elephant migration. Certainly not down here, there isn't. What happens in Botswana? There are certain areas in Botswana where they say that the elephants have migration areas and they migrate from Chobe in Botswana. They go up to Angola, they go into Namibia, they go over to Zambia, they go across to Wankie National Park in Zimbabwe. Yes, that is true. But they're not migration areas. Migration is, and I say this with emphasis because the human race has got a perception of what a migration is. And they see geese, for example, in Canada, flying from the Arctic as soon as the first bites of cold get onto the Arctic. Arctic in the summer months is idyllic for the geese. It's exactly what they want. They go up there to breed like mad. As soon as the Arctic, as soon as you get a change of weather, those geese leave there and they go down south. They change completely. You don't find You don't find geese up there in the snow during the winter months. It's totally devoid of geese. Now, you don't have that with elephants. The elephants in everywhere that I have been, but particularly in Botswana, which we're talking about now, they have what I call a pulse, is that they are constricted at the height of the dry season to available water. They've got to have water. They have got to have something to drink every day at the height of the dry season. So what happens is that as the dry season advances, so they concentrate more and more on the water supply, and when the rains come, it's the time of plenty. Elephants are preferential grazers. That means they prefer to eat green grass when it is juicy and palatable, and they go off grass when there is no grass to go. They then go onto other species of trees, and then they start eating the cambium or the bark of trees. And a lot of trees they don't eat at all. The big Natal mahoganies they don't eat at all, for example. But there are lots of trees, all the acacia species they're wiping out because of this. But the areas around the water holes during the dry season become devoid of edible plants for elephants. Now, you've got, in Botswana, for example, I actually followed some elephants in a helicopter a few years ago to see how far they went, and they were moving up to 25 kilometers, that's 10 miles, 25 kilometers away from their water hole every day, looking for food to eat. And then they had to come back again the same day to come and get to water. And the amount of energy that they were using to get from the water to the food and back to the water every day was greater than the energy expenditure was greater than the energy that they got from the food that they were eating. As soon as the rains come, that problem disappears, because now suddenly you're getting all sorts of plants growing up out of the earth, and the elephants then disperse to take advantage of this. So you have got a situation in Botswana, in Wankie, in various other places where the elephants concentrate in particular areas. They don't all concentrate in one area, but they've got their own favorite places they go to for the dry season, and they stay there for the duration of the dry season. The first rains that come, the very night of the first rains, you can see 100 elephants at one water hole one evening, and the next morning there's nothing, and you hardly see an elephant around there for months on end. They don't leave the area. They still walk in and out, but they do expand their range because water is then not limiting, and they go great distances to find all the food that is being produced. So there is no migration route, no proper migration route at all. They take certain routes to get to A to B, but they're not migration routes. So that's the one thing. There were other things that I'm getting old now and I'm forgetting. I'm in my fourth quarter.
That's right. But you still add value. So how about thinking that when it comes to the other species? You know what? There's an interesting. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but conservation over the last 100 years has had a lot of. There's been many errors that have been made. Let's put it that way. And we've tried to manage the environment rather than let the environment manage ourselves. And let's not go down that road. But the Kruger is a good example. And they had massive culling exercises there on a yearly basis. I think they stopped it in the early 90s. And you can take whatever species you want, buffalo, impala, zebra, whatever, waterbuck. Those populations have now managed themselves. It's quite interesting because I don't want to get hung up on elephant. For me, it's not about elephant. It's about the decisions that we make along the way. What are they based on? And the Kruger is a fantastic example of where none of these culling operations happen anymore. And I was privy to going on many of them because I did all my army camps there. And they don't cull anymore. There's no overpopulation. I know you mentioned.
So, Kevin, you're of the view that Kruger is being adequately managed and the numbers are not excessive. Is that the point you're making? In your view, there is no need for any population reduction in Kruger?
Well, my question is, when I was there in the 80s doing all my camps, I used to ask the game rangers, and I knew the guy at the top, Bruce Bride, and I'd say to him, where do you get your numbers from? Oh, it's science. Well, you know what? Science evolves. So what's the science numbers today? And what was it based on then? Because science has improved. So, when you start asking yourself these questions, science has made many mistakes in the past. I mean, I'm not I'm not an expert. I can just share with you what I see, and what my passions are. And I made it quite clear in the beginning. I'm not anti-hunting. I'm anti the way we go about things. And mistakes have been made, and we can't continue, I don't believe anyway, when it comes to, and I used economics right in the beginning, the numbers don't add up from an economic point of view. They don't add up from a quota point of view.
Right, so Kev, are you saying that you dispute the fact that there are too many elephant in the sub-region? Because sounds like what's central to your position. You're not sold on the fact that there are too many elephant in Southern Africa, and I think we need to include Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa in this discussion.
Well, Ron disputes the numbers as well. So, I mean, and who's driving the numbers? I don't know who's driving the numbers, but if I just do a manual exercise, which I did a few weeks ago, if you take Bot says 220, like I said, it leaves 260 left. Just run through the numbers. Zim has 100,000, Tanzania has 60,000, SA's got 32,000, Zambia's got 24, Kenya's got 25, and so on and so on and so on. You land up with just short of 700. So where are the numbers coming from? And so unless we start doing these things accurately, and I know it's difficult to count whatever species, it's not an accurate thing, it's a block thing, unless we start doing things accurately. But my question when it comes to, for example, Ron's view on elephants destroying habitat, I'm not disputing that. But what went on 100 years ago when there were 21 million? Who was managing the situation then? And unless we allow, you go back to what I said 10 minutes ago, unless we look into the future in 50 years' time and start looking at these areas as proper revenue, are we talking hundreds of billions of dollars here if we protect these areas in what they are, or for what they are? Because in the future, there's not going to be anything left. It's not about.
Well, look, the elephant in the room here, which I won't go into right now, is human population growth. In 50 years' time, with the numbers growing, I don't know, but Ron, I think you must make the case, for these numbers. I also don't know where they get them, but I do think some of these areas, Kruger particularly, are pretty well researched and managed. Those numbers, what's the margin of error on say 35,000 elephant in Kruger, for instance, and the same in Botswana?
Have you got a calculator with you?
Yeah.
You can work it out yourself. The Kruger elephants throughout the culling era, which was 27 years of culling, I've got the advantage over Kevin here insofar as I have just been through Kruger and I have done a total assessment of the impact the elephants have had on their habitats, etc. And I've been into this in some detail. It wasn't until the late 1960s before they got a technique using helicopters for counting elephants that the scientists themselves were happy with. All over the world, all over Africa rather, they have been counting with fixed-wing aircraft, and they had techniques that worked for them, and they checking one year to the next, it seemed to overlap, and they were happy with that. But the story is that in 1965, Kruger National Park, according to the scientists, had 7,000 elephants. They were then, at that stage, the top canopy trees of the Satara study area, which started off in 1944 with 13 trees per hectare. These are trees with 15 canopies of 15 meters or more. And these were the big trees that the eagles, like Marshall eagles and Bateleur eagles, tawny eagles, used to breed in these big trees. And they were dependent upon them. Your ground hornbill was dependent upon hollowed out old trees. All those, the situation has totally changed. But it all kicks off in 1970, in 1965, when it was admitted there were 7,000 elephants in Kruger. And in 1965, they discovered that for the first time since 1944, the elephants at the Satara study area had reduced the trees from 13 to 9 trees per hectare. On the basis of that, it was agreed that there would be a culling program instituted. It took 2 years for the staff to build an abattoir. You don't need an abattoir to cull elephants. And I've done it without abattoirs, but this is how it was done. And I think in South Africa, it's a little bit more sophisticated than it was done in Rhodesia in the old days. But by 1967, they were ready to start their culling. And by then, the population of elephants had grown above 7,000. But the decision was made to keep the elephants at 7,000. So thereafter, every year, they did an elephant count. And every year, they reduced the elephant population from whatever it was down to 7,000. Year by year by year for 27 years, kept them down. That didn't stop the destruction of the top canopy trees. By 1994, when culling was finally stopped, all the trees in the Satara area had been removed. They were all gone. And at that time, the scientists didn't know what to say. When they were asked how many trees have you still got in Kruger, they said, well, the elephants, because of too many elephants, the trees have been reduced in Kruger National Park by 95%, the top canopy trees, the big trees in Kruger. Subsequent to that, they were asked that question again, and of course, several years had elapsed, and they said it's more than 95%. So, which was a fair enough answer because they didn't know, but they knew that it was critically important. And the situation now is that there's the elephants through the entire 27 years of the culling program, they were increasing at the rate of 7.5% per annum every year for 27 years. And they've got that through autopsies and everything. There's nothing wrong with the science that was done during the culling era. It was all meticulously recorded. And then suddenly in 1994, it was stopped. It was stopped for a lot of reasons. One was because a lot of animal rights people got involved and they started providing sandparks with money, big money, to try this and to try that, to try the other. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they fell for it. And they stopped culling elephants in 1994. What I can say, one particular unit up there, in the first 10 years of their association with the animal rights group IFOR, was paid 9.2 million rand not to cull elephants. Basically, that's what it was. And from 1994, the incremental rate at 7.5% persisted every year. Now, if you have got a population that is increasing at 7.2%, that's the exact incremental rate required for any population of any animal to double its numbers every 10 years. If you go to a bank and you put 1,000 rand into the bank and say, when will it double? They will tell you in 7.2 years. Or at 7.2%, it'll double in 10 years. So it's a straightforward mathematical equation. But what you can do then from 1994, every year, every 10 years, you can double the numbers of elephants that occur in Kruger. So if you have got 7,000 elephants in 1994, you would have what's double that?
2004.
14,000 in 2004. Then 2014, you double that again. And in 2022, you can virtually double that again. You're up in the 40s and 50,000s here. Now, this is where something that you haven't discussed at all, Kevin, is that if you allow those animals to keep producing at that rate, they are going to totally devastate their habitat. Now, I think it was last year, they said in Botswana, all the elephants started dying here, there, and everywhere. And they got scientists in from all over the world coming in with all their computers and all their highfalutin ideas about what had killed these elephants. And it was boiled down to some special bacteria in the swamps was doing it, etc. But elephants were still dying at Victoria Falls, which is nowhere near the swamps, but it's still in the same population. And I just said at the time, and everybody laughed at me, they said, I said, they died of starvation. Now, we've just been to Botswana. We've filmed Botswana as well. And the teak forests in Chobe National Park are 100% totally devoid of natural understory. And the understory in that teak forest, what the elephants have been eating. When they go out onto the big plains in Chobe, on those floodplains there, we sat and watched, I don't know how many elephants we had in sight at one time, 100 maybe. And they spent the whole day out on the flats there. And I watched what they were doing. And you know what they were doing? They're using their front toes. The grass was only an inch high. So they couldn't pick it up like they would with normal grass. They were standing there and they were shoveling with the hooves or the toenails of their front feet, shoveling into the ground, and they were shoveling the roots of the grass out of the ground, picking it up and eating it. Now, elephants eat 200 kilograms of food a day. So you had all these elephants out there eating these little bits and pieces. When they went up into the forest, there was nothing for them left. They had to go walk long distances to be able to get food. And to me, I think I'm absolutely certain and correct when I say that those elephants last year, they were dying of starvation. And for anybody who goes to Chobe today, I invite you to go and look at those elephants and see what they're eating when they're out on the flats and they're there all day. You then follow them into the teak forest and find out what they're eating there. They're not eating anything there. They've got to pass through the teak forest and go further afield to try and find anything to eat. Now, you've got a system going here where if you've got a population doubling its numbers every 10 years, if you have got 220,000 in that mega population in Botswana, in 10 years' time, you're going to have 440,000. If you're talking about numbers, if all your concern is for numbers, then you're on the wrong track entirely, because management is the adjustment. Management is the action man takes to achieve a desired by man objective. And the desired by man objective in national parks is to maintain species diversity above all else. And the elephants at Chobe have removed the Chobe riverine forest. All the forest birds and animals that were there are now gone because they've got no habitat left. Out in the open there were pukus, there were big herds of sesame, there were all sorts of other animals there. You only get a handful. I think in the week we were there, we didn't ever see any more than 10 sesame, less than that sable, about 10 kudu, and that was all. And elephants, hundreds of buffaloes, because they were eating the short grass. But you can't just work on numbers. To be able to manage any of our national parks properly, so that we have got everything in there for posterity. We've got the species diversity. We've got to have our habitats intact. And the elephants are totally demolishing our habitats. And that is what is going to cause the destruction and the desertification of all our game reserves, including Botswana. When we went into Kruger, every single tree passed along the road. Well, there were very few that hadn't been damaged. Most of them had been seriously damaged. A lot had been ringbark. The same in Botswana. When we went down to the Reme area and the swamps.
Sorry, Rod.
When you go down to the swamps, every single tree, we drove down the road and we had a camera sticking out the window filming the trees as we went down. And every single tree had been damaged to a greater or lesser extent by elephants. And this is what we have to start thinking about. We have got to get into our heads that it's not numbers we're looking at. It's not 400,000 elephants or 1 million elephants. That doesn't matter. It's the population size you have got in particular habitats and the carrying capacity, the capacity of that habitat to carry X number of elephants. If you have got one elephant too many above the carrying capacity, you're on the slippery slope to turning that game reserve into a desert. And that's the way we have to look at this problem. Kruger National Park should be ashamed of itself. The habitat condition down there is absolutely shocking. When we went up to Pafuri, every single we saw lots of baobab trees. Every single one of them was being hammered by the elephants. Every single one. And there were piles and piles of pith where the elephants had been pushing the trees over, then standing around them and eating them. One had his head right in, just his bum was sticking out the hole. And some of those, some of these very big baobab trees in southern Africa today are up to 5,000 years old. This is recorded in the tree books of Kruger. And I've spoken to scientists, botanical scientists, who assure me some of these very old trees are that length of time. Now, those trees were 1,700 years old when Tutankhamun was pharaoh of Egypt. Now, do we have to say we can let the elephants wipe them all out? We've got another 5,000 years to go and we can plant some more. That isn't how it works. We've got to look after what we've got.
Kevin, can I butt in here and just ask you, do you accept, I mean, you spend a lot of time in Botswana. Do you accept that there is environmental degradation as a result of big animals' populations being too high, particularly elephant? I mean, do you accept that, or do you dispute that fundamental point?
No, I mean, I don't dispute it at all. But, once again, you can't just look at things in isolation over the last, 30, 40, 50 years. You have to look at, you've got to look at human settlements, which creates a lot of the stuff. It compresses these animals into certain areas, hence the degradation, because they can't move.
Well, look, I mean, the question I want to jump into, if you just accept that Ron's premise that there's visible sign of environmental damage because there are too many elephant. Unfortunately, you've got to factor in the fact that human populations are not going to stop growing. So now you've got a situation which you accept you've got too many elephant in certain areas. What is your prescribed solution to that problem?
Well, I was saying 10 minutes ago, they've opened up all these corridors, and if you take the Kruger at its maximum width, I think it's 100 k's wide. I mean, that's not far for any animal to move over a period of time. And I think there's merit in debating whether elephants moved east to west, west to east in the Kruger.
But where they're going to move to?
Kutata 16 is the same size as the Kruger, literally, which is on the Mozambican side. You've got Gonarazoo on the north, and you've got the
Gonarazoo's got too many elephants.
Well, Kutata, there's nothing. Okay, there's very little. You just don't see them. There are none there.
No, I agree. The corridor idea has got merit, in my view, but unfortunately, there's no management at all in most of these areas. That's what they're trying to upgrade. But it does seem to me that particularly in the Wanky Botswana area, there is a massive problem, and there isn't too much of an option as to where these animals are going to go. But I don't know, Ron, what do you say? Is it feasible to open up routes and solve the problem that way?
Why do you want to solve a problem that isn't there?
Why shoot them?
Because they're overtaxing their environment. If the carrying capacity for Kruger National Park, and I worked it out accurately and mathematically, it's 3,500 elephants, plus or minus 500 on either side. That's 4,000, not 50 on either side. That's a maximum of 4,000 elephants in Kruger, and they've got they admit now that they have got 34,000. I think it's another 10,000 on top of that. But now let's just take their figures. They've got 30,000 too many elephants. What the hell are you going to do with 30,000 elephants?
Well, you've just said that there isn't a problem.
There is a massive problem, and I look at the Marshall eagles, the tawny eagles, the Bateleur eagles, the ground hornbills, all these sorts of things. Your roan and your sable antelope, due to habitat change, are already in a serious predicament. The habitats are more important than the elephants.
So what do you do about this? What do you do about this problem?
You shoot them. Well, the best thing. You're talking to me or to Kevin?
No, sorry. Carry on, Ron.
The long-term solution for any wildlife management in Africa is to somehow get some kind of emotional ownership of these animals into the hands of the local Black people. If the local Black people who are living, I believe there are 2 million people living around the boundaries of Kruger National Park, if they had survival benefits from the proper management of elephants and buffalo and everything else in Kruger and tourism, if they were part of the equation, we needn't worry about having another white rhino scandal on our hands, as we've had recently, where the white rhino has been wiped out of Kruger, because the people themselves will start looking after their wildlife. And I can see a situation coming up this century. At the moment, there are 1 billion people living in Africa south of the Sahara Desert. By the end of this century, there will be 4 billion people. There will be no place for any other extra places to get elephants to go somewhere, because we don't want to kill them. But if we could start putting together a solution, and I've written out all sorts of programs for this, but there is a reluctance for mankind to be able to say, we want to utilize these things as we do cattle, sheep, and goats. I look upon wildlife as wild products of the land, the same as you look at cattle, sheep, and goats as tame products of the land. And we're quite happy at the moment to say we can use tame products of the land for our own benefit. We depend on them. We are meat eaters. So this is how we survive. All we have to do is to get our minds to switch across to the fact that wild animals are wild products of the land, and we can manage them appropriately so that the people who are going to kill them because they've got no other means of survival, if we can start creating situations whereby there is a symbiotic relationship between the local black people and the animals in the park, that is what will save our wildlife in the long term. We have to worry about human population explosion, yes, but it isn't so critical if the local people are on sides and that they are the ones who are helping to look after our wildlife. So I think the elephants, we should be trimming them down in number, and we should be halving license fees, shoot them in the park. I'm quite happy that I'm a national park man. And I'll say this now, the solution is to start taking out certain animals and letting the benefits flow to the people. Let the meat flow to the people. Let the hides flow to the people. Or half of it. Half of it goes to sand parks. The other half goes to the people. But the people must get benefits from this. If they don't, they will destroy it. They will destroy it all.
Kevin, what's your...
I mean, you're on a different... That's just another whole conversation on its own. I mean, that's like I can't have that. I agree with Ron. There's too many people, and there's too many people on the Kruger. But if you want to have that conversation, you got to go back and you got to start. You have to understand how we landed up in the situation we started. It goes back to colonial days, and I don't want to. But we
are where we are. What do we do now?
Well, I don't believe in shooting 30,000 elephant. I think it's preposterous. You'll have economic fallout from tourism, which is worth. I mean, you can Google the numbers. It's 20 times more than hunting. I mean, do we go down that road? Because this is all about hunting. It's not about culling.
Ron knows better than I do, but Wanky continued as a national park right through the culling operation. So did Kruger. When it's done properly and clinically, there's you needn't impact negatively on tourism at all, in my view.
I can give you some answers to this. Yeah. In the Ghana Resort in 1970-71, I was instructed by my department that I was to head a team to reduce the Ghana Resort elephants in those days from 5,000 to 2,500. There are 14,000 now. So it didn't do much good. But we went in there in 1 month. We were shooting. We shot 2,500 elephants a month. 3 of us shooting. Not one elephant was wounded. We stopped tourism for a month. We went in. We did it. We got out. We took all the meat out. We did all the autopsies, everything, all the meat was saved, everything. There were big holes dug, the bones and the guts was put in the holes and covered over. And we were taking them out at 41.6 elephants a day on average, maximum 57 in 1 day. And we were taking out herds when we got it right, or between 30, with 3 of us shooting with R1 rifles, we were taking out between 30 and 50 elephants in less than 60 seconds, all stone dead. So it was utterly humane. And when we'd finished that, we took everything out, we opened the gates, we let the tourists in, there was no problem.
There's got to be other solutions. And until we all sit around a table and we have proper debates about the future, because we're talking about now, and there's a bit of the future that's been discussed, but not the entire future, we're always going to be on opposite sides of the fence. And until we all sit down, we're all big enough to say, this is what we want going forward, where we're going to be in 50 to 100 years' time, and come up with sound solutions instead of short-term solutions. These are the type of discussions that are going to be had. Because I will never agree to shooting 30,000. It's not about me. I'm just talking you're
talking from an emotional point of view.
No, definitely. I'm not talking from emotion. I'm talking about the future. What the hell do I want my kids to see? A lion hanging off a wall? Because that's where it's going. That's what they're going to see. A lion trophy instead of a real lion. And that's where this is all going. You know, if you guys are talking about, because the conversations moved from hunting to culling, it's two different conversations. And, you know.
Well, no, we were talking about trophy hunting and safari hunting as a means to an end. Well, and I think Ron agrees, there is some impact on population numbers, but minimal. But it really translates into this argument or this suggestion that local people should profit from wildlife, and that gives them an investment in wildlife. And that's where hunting plays a very important role, in my view. And I've got some experience of this, where some of the return goes to local communities. There is less pressure from them on the wildlife estate. So safari hunting and culling are two different things, but it does come down to the fact that there's a trigger pulled, animals go down, numbers are affected. But, you know, you can talk about this till you're blue in the face. I think that the choices are pretty stark. Do you take this problem by the throat and deal with it and accept the fact that there are too many and the numbers have to be reduced? Or do you just turn a blind eye to it and watch an environmental catastrophe unfold? And I'm afraid, I think you happy to take the second position.
I definitely don't think so, Hannes. I think when it comes to these type of conversations, the hunting fraternity is on the back foot. It's like slavery and oil and tobacco. I mean, you're on the back foot, not me. I mean,
I agree. We're a minority. I understand that. I'm used to that. But I'm still looking for somebody who's got a better solution, and I'm not getting it from you.
Can I say something here?
I'm not going to solve the world's problems. And I mean, this conversation wasn't about that.
Well, you heard Ron suggest a solution, which is unpalatable. But I'm saying to you, what is your alternative?
Well, I've tried to tell you guys on a few occasions.
No, you said let's discuss it.
Open up corridors. You know, this whole Zambezi Transfrontier Park is massive. It's the size of Belgium or France. All the disruptions that have taken place over the last 100 years from human beings. Let's get past this phase. Let the animals, you know, get back to their, you know, and to say animals don't migrate. I mean, I can't see elephants not migrating. I mean, and because everything else does.
Kevin,
zebra, hartebeest.
Kevin, in Southern Africa, one of the most contentious issues right now politically is land. There is huge human pressure on available land. So how do you envisage just suddenly, where is all this land, this vacant land going to come from to accommodate hundreds of thousands of elephants? Where is it?
Okay, well, we have African leaders that fly to all over the world, and they're definitely not going there to bring back any benefits to Africans as such. So you can take any infrastructure in the world. As a European, you do not just take land when you want and destroy.
Okay, no, that's a different debate. The fact is, at this point in time, there is pressure on land, available land. Where is all this land that these elephants are going to move into?
Well, there's lots of land. I'll try to give you an example now of the Zambian Transfrontier area that's the size of France.
And I can tell you that in those Quotas, there's a massive problem with moving locals out of those areas because they are settled there, and it's a huge political issue. That is why the Transfrontier plan is not working, because there are people in these areas and they don't want to be overrun by wildlife.
Well, I think you both said it. Ron also said it. The locals need to benefit from wildlife management. I think in the past they haven't because of colonialism. And these transfrontier parks, if you go back to national parks in Africa, all the people were removed, the native people. It's time they lived amongst the animals, and people need to allow that process to happen. And to Ron's point, there will be benefits. And we need to allow ourselves the time to grow into these spaces and start.
So let me ask you something else from a practical point of view. So now you move a few thousand elephant into an area where you've got humans and you've got agriculture, and they start destroying their maize fields. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think there's loads of examples, Hannes, of where if you make a piece of land productive, it's not about, you can't, what's the word? You can't be a pastoralist and just move from one piece of land to another. Those days are gone. There's not enough land.
They stay put. But now they're inundated with elephant or hippo or whatever it is, or lion, they're eating their cattle. What do you do now?
I don't think they are inundated with elephant. There's many places in Africa where people live in harmony with elephants. So why are we taking the worst case example? And that's the whole thing. The justification is skewed. So focus on the good examples sometimes, and not always the bad examples. It's like farmers. The guy down the road just 10 of his sheep, his lambs die in the water trough, and 7 get killed by caracal. He doesn't focus on the 10 that died in the water trough. That's his mistake. He focuses on the caracal. And it's the same thing in conservation. Until we allow people, and because it's an interesting debate, a lot of the problems we faced with today were made by the guys who conquered the land, the white oak from Europe. We've got to get past this again.
That might be, but I'm just trying to find. Sorry, I've lost Ron.
No, it's okay. But
I just wanted to
maybe we need to have part 2. Because
let's just. I just want Ron to. Let me just. Okay, thanks, Kev. I hear you. Kevin's saying a possible solution is to open up new areas to absorb the excess numbers, which is, I suppose, encapsulated in the Transfrontier Park plan. But how viable a solution is that in your view, Ron?
I get a little annoyed at what is happening all over the world, because one of our biggest problems is that we're not managing the land that we've got properly. Now we want to get more land to manage it improperly. And we have to look, and I think Kevin and people who disapprove of the lethal management issues, that is culling and hunting, have to look at what a national park's parliamentary mandate is. What is the objective of a national park? Why do you have a national park there? A lot of people will say it's for tourism. It's not for tourism. All national parks all over the world have got one primary objective, and that's what everybody should be working towards. We should have ecosystems that are stable. And if you want to build a tourism infrastructure in any game reserve, you must first of all achieve your management objective, and also you must establish a stable ecosystem, because if you build tourism on top of an unstable ecosystem, the tourism will collapse when the ecosystem collapses, as it surely will. And that primary objective is to maintain species diversity. Nothing else is more important. Not elephants, not tourism, not lions. It's species diversity. And now to maintain species diversity, and that was the mandate handed down to sandparks when it became a national parks board by Parliament. And that's what they should have been doing all along. So to maintain species diversity, your number one priority is to maintain all habitat types in a healthy condition. If you don't get them in a healthy condition, the animals that live in them will not be healthy themselves. So this will give you some sort of priority. What comes first in terms of wildlife management priorities? First of all, the soil, because without soil, you can grow no plants. Second come plants, because without plants, you can have no animals. And the third and last priority is animals come last. And here we're trying to get animals come in first and forget about the plants and forget about the soil. We have to understand that that is the fundamental, getting down to brass tacks. And what has happened in Kruger National Park since 1964 is that they have abandoned that parliamentary mandate, and they are not looking towards maintaining species diversity. They're looking towards how can they sort it out for tourism, how can they sort it out for this, that, and the other. If you got your priorities right from the very beginning, there should be no argument.
Look, I agree. I mean, national parks are there to protect, biodiversity. But I mean, you go around, I'm sure you've traveled a lot in Africa, all your GMA areas, they are totally denuded of wildlife. There's nothing in them. Who's responsible for that? I guess it's a combination of poaching and hunting.
And it may be that the carrying capacity has been misinterpreted. Maybe their carrying capacity, because they've got lower numbers, their carrying capacity may be correct. Botswana, for example, with the numbers of elephants or particularly elephants, look at Wankie. Wankie is another one other than Kruger. I was in charge of Wankie, and I've lived 5 years of my life in Wankie. And I've shot a hell of a lot of elephants in and around Wankie. And I've seen them grow. In 1960, we did an elephant count in Wankie, and we counted 3,500 elephants. And in those days, the parks were doing the count, and they said the carrying 500 is too many elephants for Wankie. Now, too many elephants, 500, it's now got 50,000.
Not our phone.
Something's happened.
What does that sound?
I don't know.
Somebody's phone. It's not ours. Ours are off.
It might be the time on Zoom.
No, I've got a.
Because I've even lost.
I've got a subscription. It shouldn't be. Well, it's done. All right. Carry on, Ron.
The whole thing here is that it was decided in 1960 by the Parks Board that because the elephants were still hammering the habitat, really hammering all the mukwa trees, the kiats, the bigam lalas, all the thorn trees are being hammered then when we only had 3,500 elephants in Wankie. And they said that we had to reduce the numbers from 3,500 to 2,500 in Wankie. That makes it 1 elephant per 2 square miles, or 1 elephant per 5 square kilometers. Now, that's exactly the same carrying capacity we got for Kruger National Park, 1 elephant per 2 square miles. And I think that we all of us have been looking at the elephant and saying we can carry more elephants than we actually can. The carrying capacity is not great. But now it's got 50,000. That's 20 times the number of elephants that it should have. And I think the whole of Botswana is like this. So, if we're saying we mustn't kill these animals, man is the apex predator in the world. Man is the only predator of the African elephant. You take man out of the equation and you're interfering with nature. So we have to add man in. Managing man and hunting is one of the tools of management that we have got. Culling is another one of the tools of management we have got. If we don't look at that and we just say for emotional reasons, we can't kill elephants. You can't reduce Kruger's elephants from 40,000 elephants down to 3,500 elephants. You can't do that because there will be no tourism. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with a desert. And that's what the reason for that primary wildlife management objective is to make sure we don't become a desert. The way we're going, the way Kruger is going now, it's rapidly advancing towards becoming a desert.
Thanks, Ron.
And you probably...
Kevin, do you want to say something before we close?
No. I just I've enjoyed the debate, Ron. I really have. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've come up with any answers, but it's the only way to find out if there is a way forward is to talk these things over. So we need to keep trying.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Hannes. Cheers.
Ron, just carrying on where we were on the possibility of having pressure taken off the national parks and present areas where there's an overpopulation through the movement of game onto neighboring land, which is inevitably human habitat. How viable is that possibility? How realistic are we being?
Well, there's something I think that people who try to attribute human traits to wild animals don't get it, and that is that elephants are pretty sentient beings. They think things out well. If you want to have corridors, or you want to have elephants living with people and get everybody friends, etc., that's not going to happen. Elephants are very private things, and they also like their own space. They don't like to be involved with other species. And if you get a situation whereby you're getting, for example, elephants expanding out of a national park into nearby human occupation areas, as soon as your human population exceeds one person per 15 square kilometers or one person per 40 square miles, then the cow herds vacate the area.
Are you sure those numbers, Ron? One person per 40 square miles, is it not
40
not
square
higher
miles.
than that?
Hang on, is it 40 kilometers and then 40?
No, forget about the miles.
Okay, when they reach a certain level, and let's just say one, let's say when they reach a level of one person per 15 square kilometers, then your cow herds, not your bulls, your cow herds vacate the area and they go and find another place where they haven't got human congestion. Your bulls will stay back and they will raid crops and they will break down water supplies and drink water supplies and that sort of thing and interfere with human occupation of the land. But the cows, as soon as you start getting a congestion of humans, and it's not all that great, they move out of the area and they go somewhere else. So anybody who's got some idea that you can put corridors through people's lands and these sorts of things, it's a pie in the sky. It really doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm inclined to agree with you. It would be nice to imagine that there is some sort of way for these animals to coexist, but I think, as you say, pie in the sky stuff.
Yeah, well, I just thought I had to let you know that because what Kevin was saying, I'm sure, was coming from his heart, and he really believes this, but it won't work with elephants. Those sorts of ideas are really pie in the sky.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
Okay, good.